And now, your daily dose of debate, breaking news, and uncensored views. This is The Michael Medved Show.
And another great day in this greatest nation on God's green earth. A great day, a positive day, more positive news from the battlefield where the United States and our ally Israel are prevailing, and prevailing dramatically over the bad guys, and I think they are very bad guys, in Iran. But here at home, the news not so great. Economic news, which is scary and indicating that we may have tough times ahead for Americans who live here in this country and depend on the economic health of things. There's also shocking news that is getting a lot of the attention right now in Washington, D.C., and New York, Los Angeles, and all around the country. News involving, yes, Jeffrey Epstein, but it more than involves Jeffrey Epstein. It involves Donald J. Trump. The Hill reports that an FBI interviews, a series of them, 5, have been released by the Department of Justice. These are the famous missing documents from the Jeffrey Epstein files, detailing interviews with a woman who remains unnamed. She's just a Jane Doe number 4. She made claims about horrible behavior, unspeakably bad behavior by Donald J. Trump. Reports of the missing files had created a new round of backlash to the Department of Justice handling of the Epstein files release. The DOJ has been conducting a review into the missing documents following media reports about about 50 pages related to multiple interviews with this one woman who was interviewed with the FBI, and that was omitted. Officials said their omission was a mistake. Maybe that's, as Markwayne Mullin, the new Department of Homeland Security Secretary, would say, it was a misspoke, as they were wrongly declared duplicate files. Reports of the documents came weeks after the DOJ released what it said would be the final tranche of files related to Epstein. Scrutiny has continued to rise on the DOJ for its handling of the releases, and the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee subpoenaed Attorney General Pam Bondi earlier this week for testimony on the files. So there could be another member of the Trump cabinet who is in very serious trouble. This after, of course, Kristi Noem was canned yesterday. Yes, she was fired, but she has a new job. We'll talk about what her new job is with the brand new, currently non-existent Shield of America's program, which all has to do with the so-called Don Roe doctrine. Meanwhile, this from the Daily Beast about the interviews just released by the Department of Justice and interviews concerning President Trump fairly directly. In the interviews that were conducted in August and October of 2019, after Epstein had been arrested for the sex trafficking of minors, the unnamed woman alleges that she was introduced to Trump by Epstein in either New York or New Jersey. She's not sure where. She was somewhere between the ages of 15, that's the oldest she could have been, or 13. The idea that this is an exploitation involving a 13-year-old girl is just stunning, and it is hard to wrap your mind around it. She recalls being taken to a very tall building, either in New York or New Jersey, and at that very tall building, she was basically assigned or handed by Jeffrey Epstein. She was handed to Donald Trump. And this is, of course, happening back before he was president of the United States. Trump has consistently maintained his innocence in connection with Epstein and has claimed that the files have totally exonerated him. But in the interviews that, again, were conducted in August and October, because there are several of these interviews, after Epstein was arrested for sex trafficking of minors, she goes on to allege that after she was introduced to Trump at a very tall building when she was between the ages of 13 and 15, and that Trump ordered everyone else present to leave the room, and then mentioned something to the effect of, "Let me teach you how little girls are supposed to be." Cringe. That was followed by him unzipping his pants and putting her head, it says in the interviews, down to his penis. The DOJ was probed over illegally hiding this interview until just last night. The woman told FBI agents at the time that she proceeded to bite Trump. Yes, there. At which point he allegedly pulled her hair, punched her on the side of his head, and exclaimed, "Get this little beep the hell out of here." In the interviews, the woman also describes nicknames that she claims Trump and Epstein would use to refer to young women: fresh meat, untainted, and not jaded. This is all devastating. And given the fact that the president claims that he is exonerated, it's going to be tougher than ever to make that stick. Meanwhile, scrutiny has continued to rise on the DOJ for its handling of the releases, and the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee is going to be interrogating, after subpoenas, Attorney General Pam Bondi, who is going to be giving testimony on what happened to these files and why these files that were so devastating in terms of their accusations against Trump were never made public before now, despite congressional legislation that was passed calling for complete transparency and releasing everything, and the everything involves literally millions of documents. Meanwhile, there is this from the Hill about the political situation in Texas. The Texas Attorney General, Ken Paxton, who is challenging Senator John Cornyn, who was slightly ahead in a very close preliminary primary. They're going to be having their runoff coming up in a couple of weeks. But Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, laid out conditions that he said must be met for him to consider dropping out of his primary runoff against Senator John Cornyn. This is because Trump has said that he's not going to be endorsing either candidate until one of them drops out. Because obviously he thinks, and I think he's right, that it's tough and bad for the Republican Party to have this fight that Ken Paxton could actually win. We will get to that and more. Also, we'll be speaking to Jonathan Allen of NBC about the impact of the war and more on the upcoming midterm elections. All coming up here on The Medved Show. And on the Michael Medved Show, while the Epstein revelations continue to shock Washington, D.C., there's also economic news that is devastating and extremely negative, a jobs report that is depressing and alarming, and of course, an increase and a strong increase that President Trump says we'll just have to accept for a while in gas prices, which means inflation in general roaring back. Meanwhile, speaking of roaring back, news on the war from the Associated Press. Israeli warplanes pounded Beirut and Tehran today as Iran launched another wave of retaliatory strikes against Israel and Gulf countries that host U.S. forces. And also with countries that have nothing to do with the war on Iran, countries like Cyprus, which was hit by Iranian missiles. The U.S. President Donald Trump appeared to rule out negotiations with Iran in a social media post calling for its unconditional surrender. Trump told media outlets yesterday that he wants to be involved in picking Iran's next leader. But the problem is that he has said several times that many of the people that he would like otherwise to pick as leaders are dead because of the death toll for so many prominent people who are part of this regime. In fact, the death toll continues to rise. At least 1,230 people have died in Iran so far, more than 200 in Lebanon, and around a dozen in Israel have been killed. That, according to officials. In those countries, 6 U.S. troops have been killed. Now, you might ask, why is Lebanon involved in this war at all? And it's because they have no control over the Hezbollah terrorist group, which is closely aligned with Iran and supported by Iran, and dominates southern Lebanon, going up to the Israeli border. The U.S. military said early today that it struck an Iranian drone carrier, setting it ablaze. Its central command released black and white footage of the burning carrier. The Iranian military did not immediately acknowledge the attack. And in London, police said today that 4 men have been arrested on suspicion of aiding Iran by spying and possibly plotting against the Jewish community in London. The Metropolitan Police said the suspects, 1 Iranian and 3 dual British-Iranian nationals, were taken into custody and that searches are ongoing. And meanwhile, one of the impacts of the war has been terrible economic news. The New York Times reports that job growth fizzled in February, a sign of unexpected weakness in the labor market. Employers cut 2,000 jobs in February, the Labor Department reported today, and the unemployment rate rose to 4.4%. The job losses cut across nearly all major sectors, including healthcare, which was weighed down by a nurses' strike in California. The report dimmed the picture of the labor market and all but shut down the prospect of a swift resurgence in growth after an anemic year of hiring that was weighed down by economic uncertainty. Many economists had forecast that employers would shake off their reluctance to hire this year. But revisions to previous months bolstered the case that the job losses in February were consistent with a broader trend rather than just a blip. Employers shed 17,000 jobs in December, and hiring figures for January were also revised downward slightly. Taken together, the job growth for the last 3 months effectively slowed to zero. This is a rough report, said Corey Stahl, an economist at the Indeed Hiring Lab. You might even say this is a bad report. And speaking of bad reports, there is this Republican representative, Tony Gonzalez of Texas, said that he is ending his reelection bid. This had to happen. After admitting to an affair with a former staffer who later committed suicide by lighting herself on fire and burning herself to death. After deep reflection and with the support of my loving family, Congressman Gonzalez said, I have decided not to seek re-election while serving out the rest of this Congress with the same commitment I've always had to my district. That's what he said in a statement. The Gonzalez announcement came just hours after GOP leaders, including Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, called for him to withdraw from the election. Notably, however, party leaders have not called for Gonzalez to resign his seat because they need him and they need that seat for the very narrow Republican majority in the House of Representatives. The district in Texas that Republican Gonzalez holds is not considered to be a swing district. And with him off the ballot and another Republican on the ballot, this is assumed to be a fairly safe Republican seat. But then some of the polling indicates that with the economy suffering and with the war unpopular right now, the idea of safe seats for Republicans is dim. In fact, coming up, we're going to be talking about the prospects for big change in the midterm elections with Jonathan Allen of NBC News. The one thing that he makes very clear is the takeaway from the primaries so far, primaries in Texas, of course, which has gotten a lot of attention, and North Carolina and Arkansas. The primaries indicate that voters are just itching for change. They are eager to put their stamp on fairly dramatic changes in Washington. So what are voters looking for? And where do we go from here? We will be getting to that with Jonathan Allen of NBC News coming up here on The Medved Show. It is both an honor and a privilege to welcome back to the Michael Medved Show Jonathan Allen. Jonathan is an award-winning reporter and New York Times bestselling author who covers national politics for NBC News. He's also the co-author of 3 triumphant bestsellers about recent campaigns, HRC, Shattered, and Lucky. Lucky about the unrepeated success of Joe Biden and his campaign. And, of course, the rest of them featuring Donald Trump. And, Jonathan, before we get started, I just want to remind folks to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Michael Medved Official. Right now, you take a look at the primaries and you take a look at the coming up, what is happening with the political situation in this country, and you say voters are itching for change. What aspect of the primary elections indicated the greatest focus on that desire for change?
I think the biggest thing that I saw was on the Democratic side, the just incredible turnout. You're seeing presidential election level turnout in midterm primaries right now on the Democratic side, particularly in Texas. But I think also what you saw was some incumbents going down in primaries. You saw, for instance, Dan Crenshaw, congressman from Texas, beaten in a Republican primary. You saw John Cornyn, the longtime senator from Texas, win a plurality in a three-way race, but get forced into a runoff with Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas. You see Tony Gonzalez, congressman from Texas, who was having an affair and did not admit to it until the day after the primary, but forced into a runoff and now saying that he will not continue to try to win that runoff. So I think what you're seeing is a little bit of anti-incumbent. I think you're seeing a whole lot of anti-Trump energy on the Democratic side, and between those two things, it reads as a big moment for change. Now we're in March of 2026, and the midterm elections are in November, and a lot of things can happen between now and then. But if elections were held today, I would not want to be the incumbent or the incumbent party.
Okay, and concerning the incumbent party, the polling shows that the current war in which we're engaged is not popular, and that by almost 2-to-1 margin, Americans disapprove of our waging war against Iran. Is that going to be a factor, you think, when the election rolls around a couple of months from now?
I think the political problem, so maybe, it depends on whether we're still at war and how that's going. But I think politically, one of the problems with going to war is that there's not a big upside. If the war is a quick war that we win decisively, it is out of people's minds. If it is a longer war that takes months and months or years to accomplish objectives, what we've seen in the recent years is that it becomes less popular, and whether that's Vietnam or Afghanistan or Iraq, that these wars, as they drag on, become less popular with the American public. This one starts out unpopular on most political issues, and I don't think the president went into Iran for political advantage, because it is so clearly not something that would be politically advantageous. But on most political issues, you seek to do things that unify your party and divide the other party. And in this case, what the president has done is taken on a war that unifies Democrats, and at the very least questioning whether the process was right, whether he should have gone to Congress. And in a lot of their cases, they don't agree with the war at all, and splits Republicans. Some of them are in favor of it, and others are worried about whether he should have gone to Congress, or whether this is the right war, or whether it was done with the right intentions in mind. And so I think there's an enormous political danger for the president in it, and that's the reason I don't think he did it for political reasons. Because if he was thinking about what his best political interest was, I think it would have been relatively obvious that this was not going to be something that was immensely popular to start with.
Well, especially with the president saying that people have to tolerate the idea of gas prices going up. I mean, one of the things that he's been fact-checked on from all of his public appearances, including the State of the Union, is the idea that gas prices are about as low as they can go. Well, not anymore. The impact of the war on the economy looks like it could be profound, even if the victory, the ultimate victory, which I know we all hope we achieve, that the economic impact could be devastating, no?
Certainly. I've been watching gas prices all week, and we've seen, as rapid as I can recall, rises in gas prices, right? The average gallon of gas was under $3 a week and a half ago, and now you're trending up over $3.25. So 30 cents a gallon. You got a 15-gallon tank, right? Like you're starting to, if your gallon of gas or your tank of gasoline costs you another $5, than it did a week ago, and you're getting 2 or 3 tanks of gas a week because of your driving habits. People feel that.
Yeah, I did. It's right where people live. Speaking of where people
By
live,
the way, I'm sorry, Michael. One other thing. The other thing that doesn't get talked about as much is for everybody who's getting Amazon or buying things from Amazon or buying things from businesses with transportation costs, jet fuel costs. I mean, everything ends up going up. All your goods end up going up.
you have another column recently about the what led Trump to replace Kristi Noem. A good political move. And what is, by the way, the Shield for America, where she is getting an alternate job?
I think it's a shield for Kristi Noem, a fig leaf, if you will, of a new job for her to take on, so that he wasn't outright firing her. That I mean, politically, I think it was a necessary move for the president. I don't think he couldn't sustain having her at DHS. Obviously, the killing of Alex Priddy in particular in Minnesota was a bad moment for her, not just because her department agents killed somebody, who there was no evidence of him being a threat, but also because she immediately went out and called him a domestic terrorist, along with other administration officials, by the way, and then didn't have an answer for it in hearings. I just don't, and there were contracting issues at DHS. There's a whole spate of things, but ultimately, I think the president watched her testify before Congress and blame him for the advertising campaign that she undertook featuring her earlier this year, and just was done with her.
Okay, a lot of people are talking about who's next. Next to get the hook, is it Pam Bondi or Kash Patel?
I don't play in the prediction markets, Michael. I know they're very lucrative, but I do not know who will be next.
Uh-huh. Kash Patel has been sort of on people's list as a potential job switcher coming
Yeah.
up.
The president
Meanwhile,
did not. The president did not like the Miracle on Ice
right,
when he drank the beer with the hockey team.
the Miracle. Well, that's again who did the president liked it well enough to feature the hockey players, but not Kash Patel. Appreciated Jonathan Allen, his most recent columns, which are always entertaining and illuminating, are posted up at our website at michaelmedved.com.
Medved.
This ain't Texas, ain't no hold'em. So lay your cards down, 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 down. So park your Lexus and throw your keys up. Stick around, round, 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 round.
And on the Michael Medved Show, there is still excitement, if that is the right word, or interest in the Texas primary, because the final primary election is coming up. There's a runoff for the nomination for U.S. Senate between the incumbent senator, Cornyn, and the challenger, who is the Attorney General of the state of Texas, Ken Paxton, who was recently identified by Kevin Williamson as the most scandal-plagued politician in the country. And that's quite a distinction. But The Hill is reporting that Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton laid out conditions that he said must be met for him to consider doing what apparently President Trump wants him to do, which is to drop out of his primary runoff against Senator John Cornyn, the Republican of Texas who is looking for his fifth term. Paxton said in a post on the social platform X that he would consider leaving the race if the Senate lifts the filibuster, which requires 60 votes for most measures to proceed. And the Senate would also have to use that end of the filibuster to pass the Save America Act. That legislation would require people to provide proof of citizenship before registering to vote and to add certain identification requirements to cast a ballot. And Paxton said in his statement, Senator John Cornyn is a coward who has refused to support abolishing the filibuster to pass this bill. Now, fake news reporters and the establishment are trying to destroy me with misinformation, Paxton said. Paxton's comments come a day after Trump indicated that he plans to endorse soon in the runoff between Cornyn and Paxton for the incumbent's Texas Senate seat. Trump said he wanted to avoid an ugly battle in the runoff scheduled for May, and that whomever he doesn't endorse should drop out of the race. Paxton initially said he would stay in the race regardless of Trump's decision, which the president say was bad for him to say. Okay, there's a little bit of friction there between President Trump and Ken Paxton. So maybe that leads me to go in the other direction, Trump told Politico. Speculation has risen since Texas's primary Tuesday that Trump would endorse Cornyn, as national Republicans have raised concerns about Paxton's electability. Pressure has also risen on Trump to endorse after State Representative James Tallarico won the Democratic nomination. And by the way, it's not just that Tallarico won the nomination. Tallarico got multiple more votes than any of the Republicans in the race because the Democrats turned out. As Jonathan Allen was saying, the turnout for Democrats in Texas was epic. And usually you don't, in a partisan primary election, in an off-year election, there's no presidential candidate on the ballot, you don't get that kind of enthusiasm, but the enthusiasm was there for Tallarico. Despite Paxton's demands, Senate Majority Leader John Thune, the Republican of South Dakota, quickly poured cold water on them. You guys know where the votes are on the filibuster. That's not going to happen, Thune told reporters. Most Republicans are recognizing the importance of the filibuster because there are times when you're not in the majority, and the idea of things being more difficult to get through the Senate is something that protects a minority where, by the way, it is possible, not likely this time, that one of the results of the midterm elections will be not only shifting the control of the House to the Democratic side, which appears likely, but also a possibility, particularly if this Senate seat in Texas goes the wrong way for Republicans, that the Democrats take over the Senate by one vote or two votes or something of that nature. Cornyn has expressed support for the Save America Act and some openness to changing filibuster rules, but he has also expressed concern about Democrats being able to take advantage of that if they regain power. And there is this also that is going on in the preparations for the midterm elections, that in Montana, just before the closure of candidate filing in Montana, the incumbent U.S. Senator Steve Daines withdrew from his reelection campaign for a third term. The U.S. Attorney for Montana, whose name is Kurt Alme, filed for office at 4:52 p.m., and Daines endorsed Alme in a statement shortly after. In other words, Daines pulled out of the race, and it's considered a surprise. Nobody was expecting it. Just moments before the filing window closed. So he, in effect, appointed his own successor, which is a controversial thing to do. This is a probably safe Republican seat in the U.S. Senate, but a little bit less so after Steve Daines quit the Congress and indicated that 2 terms is enough for him. He says, as people often do in these circumstances, he wants to spend more time with his family. And meanwhile, concerning spending more time on site in the White House, maybe with your family, President Trump is running into some controversy with his massive East Wing ballroom project, which is poised to get its final approval from a government commission that oversees planning for federal buildings and land in the nation's capital. Despite receiving over 32,000 public comments, 32,000 overwhelmingly opposing the construction of the big, beautiful new ballroom, the National Planning Commission is expected to take a final vote to approve plans for the ballroom, marking the latest clearance for the project in a process that has been on a fast track since Trump suddenly demolished the East Wing. You remember the video of that last October. Approval by the NCPC, that's the National Capital Planning Commission, would mean that any further attempt to halt construction would require intervention from the courts. And with all of this going on, there is also conversation about the economy. And that reaction to the economic news is summed up when a CNBC anchor was responding briefly to the new plunging Trump jobs report. This is clip 15.
We go. This is the big Feb jobs report. Non-farm payrolls, minus 92,000. Minus 92,000. That is a biggie. Minus 92,000 last month's 130K, downgraded to 126,000. Minus 92,000. Well, what would that comp to? Minus 185 in December of 2020. There's where our comp is.
Yeah, it is a big day for economic considerations. We'll be speaking coming up to Rick Newman, who is an award-winning economics reporter who worked for many years for Yahoo. We will be speaking to him about where we go from here and the linkage between war and prosperity. That and more coming up in This Greatest Nation on God's green earth.